The wind moved across the old farmhouse with a strange heaviness as if it carried voices instead of air. The house belonged to the Rahman family who had shifted there after the death of their grandfather, believing the countryside would bring peace and a fresh start, but nothing about the place felt peaceful to them. From the day they arrived, the farm stretched out in every direction with dead trees and cracked earth and an emptiness that settled inside the chest like cold smoke. The mother Amina tried to smile as she walked through the rooms, touching the wooden walls that felt damp and warm as if alive, but her children, Sarah and Hamza, kept close to her legs, whispering that the house made sounds when nobody moved. Their father Idris brushed off their fear, saying old houses make noises, but his words did not reach his own eyes, which kept drifting toward the hallway where the shadows leaned too far forward as if listening. That first night they slept with the lights on, though they all pretended not to be scared. The wind banged against the windows with a rhythm like slow knocking, and Amina kept twisting in her bed, hearing footsteps in the attic above, even though no one had ever gone up there because the door was jammed shut from inside. Hamza woke just after midnight, hearing someone whisper his name in a long stretched voice that felt cold against his ear. He sat up shaking and looked around the dark room where his sister slept beside him, but the whisper came again from the corner where the closet stood, tall with its wooden door slightly open. He gathered his courage and called out softly, and the whisper stopped as if holding its breath, waiting for him to come closer. He pulled the blanket over his head and did not sleep again. In the morning, Idris found scratches on the floorboards outside the children's room, thin lines carved into the wood like something sharp had dragged across, but he told no one because he did not want to fuel fear in the house. He spent the day cleaning the barn, even though their grandfather had not kept animals for years, but the barn felt wrong too, as if something lived there whilst out of sight. A rope hung from the ceiling, swinging gently even though the air was still, and Idris felt a pressure behind him as though someone stood close, staring at the back of his neck. When he turned, there was nothing, only dust floating like ash. Amina meanwhile tried to organize the kitchen, but every drawer she opened smelled faintly of soil and something sweet like decaying fruit. She found a small wooden box tucked behind a row of old jars carved with symbols she did not understand, and when she touched it she felt a pulse under her fingers like a heartbeat inside the wood. She shut the drawer quickly and stepped back, feeling something crawl up her spine. Sarah wandered outside to explore the fields, but the ground felt strangely soft under her shoes, like it might swallow her feet if she stood too long. She saw an old scarecrow in the distance, but as she approached she realized it had no face, only stretched cloth where eyes and mouth should have been. Yet she felt it watching her with an attention that made her throat tighten. A low groaning sound rose from the field, and the scarecrow leaned slightly to the left as if bowing toward her, even though no wind passed through. She ran back to the house, breathless, trembling, and refused to say what she saw, only clinging to her mother with nails digging into Amina's arms. That night the attic door unjammed itself with a long moaning creak that echoed through the hallway, waking them all. Idris grabbed a lamp and stood at the bottom of the stairs while the others huddled behind him, feeling the temperature drop so quickly the light flickered. When he looked up, the attic door stood open, but the darkness inside felt thick, almost solid, like a mouth waiting to swallow whatever entered. He called out, but his voice came back softer, as if muffled by something in the attic that did not want their words. He shut the door firmly, but just as his hand left the handle it swung open. Again, slow, deliberate, almost playful. He placed a chair under it and walked back, but before he reached the end of the hallway the chair scraped across the floor by itself, and the door began to close and open like someone breathing behind it. Amina decided they would stay in one room together for the night. They locked themselves inside the master bedroom, but locking did nothing because the sounds came from the walls, from under the bed, from inside the wardrobe where something shifted and knocked as if trying to climb out. Hamza whispered that someone was standing outside the window, and when Amina looked she saw a figure pressed against the glass, a pale shape, with a hand stretched out, not hitting the window, just resting on it like it was waiting to be invited in. The face had no features, only smooth skin, but she could feel its eyes. She screamed and Idris rushed to close the curtains, but when he touched them the fabric felt wet like it had been soaked in cold water even, though the room was warm. Morning came, but offered no comfort. The house smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic like old blood. When they came downstairs, they found muddy footprints leading from the back door into the living room and stopping right in front of the family portrait they had placed on the wall. The photograph had been altered during the night. A dark figure stood behind them in the picture, tall, thin, with long fingers resting on their shoulders. Though no such figure had been there when the photo was taken, Idris tore it down, but when he threw it away he heard a whisper under his breath like a thank you drawn out too long. Sarah refused to eat, saying the food tasted like soil. Hamza kept staring at the ceiling because something moved up there, crawling slowly from one end of the attic to the other, dragging what sounded like nails across the wood. Amina could not ignore the wooden box she had found earlier. She felt drawn to it like it wanted her attention. She opened the drawer again and the box seemed slightly bigger, as if it had grown overnight, its carving steeper, more defined. When she placed her fingers on the lid, it warmed under her touch. She lifted it slowly and inside was a small bundle wrapped in cloth stained dark brown. As she unwrapped it, a smell filled the room, thick and rotten, and something inside her mind whispered not to continue, but her hands kept moving. Inside lay a shriveled object that looked like a tiny heart, dried and blackened, but still faintly beating as if trying to wake. A voice rose behind her, soft, gentle, like her grandfather calling her name. She spun around, but no one stood there, only the kitchen, empty and silent, yet the air felt crowded as if someone had just walked through. She dropped the box and the heartbeat grew louder, echoing across the room. Even though the heart lay still, Idris rushed in and grabbed her, pulling her away. But when he looked at the box, the heart was gone, leaving only imprints in the cloth as if something had crawled out. The house grew darker even in daylight. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching along the floor, following them like loyal pets. Walls breath lightly, bulging in and out. The floorboards trembled beneath their steps as though something moved inside the house, not under it, but inside the very structure, shifting, crawling, growing. They decided to leave. They packed quickly, threw bags into the car and ran outside. But the sky turned gray, so suddenly it looked like night had rushed in. The engine refused to start. The road behind the house seemed longer than before, stretching into fog that had not been there 5 minutes earlier. Something began walking toward them from the field, not running, not crawling, just walking with slow, patient steps. The scarecrow was no longer standing on its wooden post. It moved with its head tilted, its cloth face blowing without wind, its arms dangling but reaching a little more with every step, and behind it shapes rose from the soil as if the earth itself was exhaling, bodies long buried. Amina screamed for the children to get back inside, but the house door slammed shut on its own, locking them out. Hamza pounded on the wood, but the house groaned deep from within. As if enjoying their panic, the scarecrow stopped only a few feet away. Its body jerked unnaturally, like something inside was pulling the limbs from different directions. Its cloth face began to tear, slowly revealing darkness beneath, not emptiness, but movement, like thousands of tiny hands pressing outward. Idris grabbed a rock and stepped in front of his family, but before he could swing, the scarecrow lifted its head, and from inside the darkness a whisper flowed out, calling his name with the same voice as his father who had died. Idris froze, tears filling his eyes, and the scarecrow reached for him with fingers that stretched far longer than cloth should allow, wrapping around his arm, pulling him forward gently, almost lovingly. Amina grabbed him, but something unseen pushed her back so hard she hit the ground, choking on cold air that tasted like rot. Sarah felt something grip her ankle from the soil, pulling her down as if the ground wanted to swallow her alive. Hamza tried to pull her free, but more hands rose from the dirt, pale, wrinkled, clutching at her legs, her waist, her arms dragging her slowly downward. She screamed as the soil closed over her feet, rising to her knees. Idris broke free from the scarecrow and threw himself at her, pulling with all his strength. The scarecrow tilted its head, watching silently as if enjoying the struggle. At last Sarah was pulled free, her body covered in cold mud with handprints engraved into her skin like bruises that pulsed with a heartbeat of their own. The fog thickened until the field disappeared and only the house remained, visible behind them, its windows glowing faintly with a sickly yellow light. The door creaked open, slowly inviting them in. Amina begged not to go back, but the fog pressed against their backs, forcing them closer to the doorway until the house swallowed them inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the house changed. The walls closed in slightly, the light dimmed, the air became warm like breath. The floor pulsed beneath their feet like flesh. They tried to escape, but every door led to another hallway. Every hallway led deeper into the house, which now felt endless, shifting, rearranging like a living maze. Voices whispered from the walls, calling their names softly, sweetly, promising comfort if they would only listen. Hamza covered his ears, screaming, but the voices echoed inside his skull. Amina held both children close, trembling, while Idris moved forward, trying to find a way out. He reached a door at the end of a hallway and pushed it open, revealing their old living room, but twisted. The walls were covered in hundreds of photographs of their family, each showing the dark figure standing closer behind them than before, its hand now resting on their shoulders, its featureless face tilted toward the camera. In the center of the room sat the wooden box from the kitchen, larger, now almost the size of a chest. It opened by itself, and a wave of cold swept out. Inside lay not one heart, but four small shriveled shapes beating slowly with rhythm, matching the breaths of each family member. Amina felt her chest tighten, each beat echoing painfully. Hamza dropped to his knees, clutching his ribs. Sarah gasped, trying to breathe, but failing, as if the box held their lives inside. Idris staggered forward, reached into the box, and grabbed the hearts, crushing them in his fists. A scream ripped through the house, so loud the walls shook and the photographs fell to the floor. The house convulsed like a wounded animal, and the lights burst into darkness. The family fell to the ground, feeling the floor beneath them crack open like jaws, preparing to swallow them whole. A blinding flash erupted, and suddenly they were outside on the dirt road, gasping for air as the farmhouse burned behind them, flames rising unnaturally high as if feeding on something more than wood. They watched in silence until the house collapsed into itself, leaving only ash. No one spoke during the drive away. No one ever spoke of what happened again. But on quiet nights, each of them heard faint knocking beneath their beds, and sometimes in their dreams they saw the scarecrow standing at a distance, watching, waiting, knowing they would one day return.